For most people, losing the ability to move means losing a huge part of their independence. Typing a message, playing a game, or even feeding yourself can become impossible. Neuralink is starting to change that. 7 people have received Elon Musk's brain implant, and they're already using it to control computers, browse the internet, and interact with robotic devices. For these patients, those simple actions can mean getting back a piece of everyday life they thought was gone forever. The technology has also faced setbacks, failures, and plenty of unanswered questions. Every patient is helping Neuralink discover what works, what doesn't, and how far this technology can actually go. And behind those 7 patients is a much bigger group, 10,000 people waiting for their turn. But before I share the actual stories of these 7 patients, let's first understand how Neuralink even works, because the technology behind it is what makes everything they've done possible. For someone paralyzed from a spinal cord injury, the brain usually isn't the broken part. When that person tries to move their hand, their brain can still send the command. The problem is the wiring. That signal travels down the spinal cord like electricity through a cable, but somewhere along the way, that cable is damaged. The message gets sent, it just never arrives. Neuralink basically taps the signal before the break. Instead of fixing the spinal cord, it listens to the brain, picks up the movement command, and sends that information wirelessly to a computer. It's essentially a wiretap on your intentions. Inside the head is a small device fitted into a section of the skull about the size of a large coin. Once the skin heals over it, you can't see it. There are no wires or ports sticking out. It charges wirelessly through a headband. Attached to the device are 64 incredibly thin, flexible threads carrying 1,024 tiny electrodes. These are placed into the part of the brain responsible for movement. And no, it cannot read your thoughts. It just detects the brain activity associated with trying to move. At first, the system has to learn what those signals mean. The patient repeatedly controls a cursor while the software studies their brain activity and connects different patterns to different movements. Eventually, the patient doesn't need to consciously think about moving a hand or mouse. They simply intend for the cursor to move, and it does. And because placing those threads requires insane precision, Neuralink uses its R1 surgical robot. It maps blood vessels on the brain and carefully inserts each thread while avoiding them. The technology sounds incredible on paper, but to test it, Neuralink needed a human, and that was Nolan Arbaugh. Number 7. Imagine being completely paralyzed for 8 years and then, suddenly, getting your life back. Nolan was just a college student when a swimming accident left him paralyzed from the shoulders down. For 8 long years, he was trapped in bed. He couldn't move. He couldn't shift his body at night. To type on a computer, he had to hold a stick between his teeth. In early 2024, he became patient 1. And for 1 incredible month, he had total freedom. He was playing speed chess, texting friends, and controlling a computer screen using only his mind. Then, the unimaginable happened. It all started slipping away. The cursor started to slow down. Nolan tried as hard as he could, focusing with all his energy, but the pointer barely moved. Day by day, the digital world he just got back started to freeze up. Within a week, his new freedom was practically gone. Now think of it like a cable with 1,000 tiny wires inside, but almost all of them suddenly got unplugged. Nearly 85% of the threads in his brain had slipped loose. Nolan was crushed. He had finally tasted independence, only to feel the walls closing back in. But as videos of him playing chess were going viral around the world, Nolan made a heavy decision. He kept quiet, because he knew what was on the line. If he spoke up, people would panic. Critics would call the project a failure, and other paralyzed patients might lose their only shot at a future. So he swallowed his heartbreak, pretended everything was fine, and let the cameras keep rolling. He was willing to suffer his loss in silence if it meant keeping hope alive for everyone else. When the chip started failing, Neuralink couldn't do another surgery. Instead, their engineers tried an impossible gamble, fixing a hardware breakdown entirely through software. They rewrote the computer code to pick up even the softest signals from the few threads left in his brain. Before the fix, Nolan had to strain his mind and tense up his body just to move the pointer an inch. He was exhausted. With the new code, he didn't have to force it anymore. He could just sit back, relax his body, and think about moving. And the screen responded right away. It didn't just bring him back. Within weeks, Nolan was moving faster than ever, breaking world records with just a fraction of the hardware he started with. Today, he still uses his implant up to 10 hours a day. He calls her Eve. He manages his own schedule, plays chess, and speaks to standing ovations at major tech summits. But Nolan was only the beginning, because the next patient wasn't just going to control a computer, he was going to control something physical. Sometimes, life doesn't take your talent, it just takes the hands you need to use it. Alex was an automotive technician. He fixed engines, he made parts. His whole life ran through his hands. As he put it himself, building and fixing things was pretty much everything he was. Then a car accident fractured 2 bones in his neck, called C4 and C5, and he lost movement in all 4 limbs. For someone who defined himself by making things, that loss cut deeper than the paralysis itself. The skill never left. That was the cruel part. He still knew exactly how a part should fit together. He just had no way to get those ideas out of his head. But Alex tried anyway. He started teaching himself CAD, a type of software used to design objects on a computer. He navigated the program with a controller he operated with his mouth, one small input at a time. It could take him hours to draw a simple shape that he would already see perfectly in his mind. Then, Alex applied to become Neuralink's second patient, and this changed everything for him. They programmed the R1 surgical robot to push the tiny threads deeper into the motor cortex, the part of the brain that controls movement. They also left extra room in the wires. The idea was simple. The brain is always moving slightly inside the skull, so instead of pulling the threads tight, give them enough room to move with it. It worked. None of Alex's threads slipped out, and his speed surprised even the engineers. Within about 5 minutes of turning the system on, Alex was moving a computer cursor with his thoughts. By the second day, he was doing CAD work. Within weeks, he was designing tools and parts again, the very thing he thought he had lost forever. Then, Alex got curious. He wanted to know how quickly he could control the system. So, he loaded up Counter-Strike 2, a fast-paced shooting game where even a tiny delay can make a difference. He connected his brain signals to his character's movement and started playing without using his hands or any equipment, just with his thoughts. He later joined Neuralink's Convoy study, where his brain implant connects to a robotic arm. He became the first person to control a robotic arm with a Neuralink device. He could reach out, grab a cup, and lift it to his mouth. He even flew a drone. But his biggest goal is much simpler. He wants to open his own front door and go outside without waiting for someone to help him. And Alex proved Neuralink could give someone back control of the world around them. But the third patient had lost something even more fundamental, his ability to speak. Brad Smith hadn't spoken in years. Then his family heard his voice again. Brad was diagnosed with ALS at 37, a disease that slowly destroys the nerves that control your muscles. First, he lost his legs, then his arms, then his voice. By the time he became Neuralink's third patient, he couldn't move anything except his eyes. But his mind was still completely clear. Brad knew exactly what he wanted to say. He could still think normally, he just couldn't get the words out. And that made his case very different from the first 2 patients. Nolan and Alex had spinal cord injuries. Their brains were still producing normal movement signals. Brad had a different problem. ALS was damaging the nerve cells that produced those movement signals in the first place. So when Neuralink began studying his brain, the engineers couldn't simply look for the same hand and arm signals they had found in Nolan and Alex. They had to find another way. The team spent days studying Brad's brain, looking for any area that was still producing a clear signal. Then they found one. It was the part of his brain that used to control his tongue. When Brad imagined moving his tongue, that area still became active. So the engineers connected those signals to a computer cursor. Brad learned to control it surprisingly quickly. At first, he had to think about moving his tongue to control the cursor, but after a few weeks, he said he wasn't even thinking about his tongue anymore. He simply thought about where he wanted the cursor to go, and it went there. For the first time in years, Brad had a way to control a computer again. But he wanted to use that ability for something much more personal. Before ALS, Brad made videos about his life, so he decided to make one again. Using his thoughts, he could move through an editing program, cut clips, move audio around, and put the video together. But there was one thing missing: his voice. So the Neuralink team went through old family videos and phone recordings, searching for hours of Brad speaking from before he became sick. They found recordings of his real voice and used them to create an AI version of it. Not a generic computer voice, but Brad's own voice, his tone, rhythm, and the way he actually sounded. Brad then used his Neuralink setup to type out his script with his thoughts. And when the video played, his family heard something they hadn't heard in years. Brad speaking again, in his own voice. But the implant gave him something else back, too. Now, before the surgery, Brad used an eye tracking camera attached to his wheelchair to communicate. It followed his eyes, but there was one major problem: sunlight. Bright light could interfere with the system, so going outside during the day could mean losing his ability to communicate. The Neuralink implant didn't have that problem. Now Brad can sit outside on a bright afternoon and play Mario Kart with his kids while still communicating with them. For years, ALS had been taking away Brad's ability to interact with the world around him. Neuralink gave him another way to reach it. But the next patient wasn't fighting ALS. He was fighting to get back something else: his independence. And his story would show just how much that can change a person. Number 4. Imagine spending your whole life serving your country, built on discipline, strength, and being in total control. Then, in a single second, a motorcycle accident takes all of it away. That was RJ's reality. Suddenly, he was paralyzed, unable to move, work, or do the simplest things for himself. The hardest part wasn't just losing his movement, it was losing his independence. Then came April 2025. RJ got a new sense of hope when he became the 5th person to receive a Neuralink brain implant. His surgery was a major milestone, the first one done at a new location, the University of Miami, using a surgical robot to place tiny wires into his brain. He went home the next day. When the chip was turned on, everything shifted. Just by thinking, RJ could control a computer screen, move the cursor, and browse the web all on his own. No extra help, no special tools. Today, every time RJ uses the system, his data helps Neuralink make the technology better for the next person in line. It's more than just using a screen. It gave RJ back his drive, his spark, and a real reason to keep pushing forward. But the next patient would prove this technology could do something even more personal: give someone back their own handwriting. In 2005, a sudden car accident changed 16-year-old Audrey Cruz's life forever. In an instant, she lost all movement below her neck. 20 years, she watched the world move on, while she struggled just to answer an email using a stick in her mouth. She lost her freedom. She lost her independence. She couldn't even sign her own name. Then came July 2025. Audrey became the 9th person in the world and the very first woman to receive a Neuralink brain implant. Her surgery at the University of Miami was a huge moment for the medical team too. It was the first time they completed 2 implants back-to-back in a single weekend, proving the procedure was becoming safe and reliable. Doctors placed a coin-sized chip into her brain. Once it was turned on, Audrey did something incredible. Using only her thoughts, she moved a digital pen across a laptop screen and spelled out a single word: Audrey. It was shaky, but it was hers. For the first time in 20 years, she had written her own name. Audrey is honest about her journey. She tells everyone that the chip won't bring back her physical body or make her walk again. But inside her digital world, she has total freedom. Today, she uses her mind to paint full-color digital art, draw pictures for her followers, and create things no one thought was possible. Her first post said it best: "I tried writing my name for the first time in 20 years. I'm working on it. Lol." It wasn't just a signature on a screen. It was Audrey taking her identity back. And if Audrey showed what the implant could give someone back, the next patient would show just how fast a person could learn to use it. Imagine spending your youth as an elite soldier, a British Army paratrooper built on speed, quick reactions, and absolute physical strength. Then, in an instant, a spinal cord injury changes everything, leaving you paralyzed from the shoulders down. For years, John Noble was trapped in his own body, unable to move or live the high-energy life he once knew. Then, in December 2025, everything changed. John became patient 18 in Neuralink's global trial. During a procedure in London, a surgical robot placed tiny wires into his brain. Just 24 hours later, he was back home, resting and preparing for what came next. By week 2, John connected the implant to his laptop. At first, moving a cursor on a screen took focus, but within days, something incredible happened. His brain adapted. Controlling the screen didn't feel like operating a machine anymore. It felt as natural as moving his own hands used to. 80 days after his surgery, John did the unthinkable. He logged into World of Warcraft to play a high-speed raid with other players. This isn't a slow puzzle game. It's a fast, chaotic game that requires lightning-fast speed, rapid decisions, and complex controls. For a person with working hands, it's tough. For someone who is paralyzed, it should be impossible. It took less than 3 months to go from brain surgery to playing high-level video games. The technology gave John a tool, but his own mind gave him back his speed, his edge, and his freedom. With 21 people now running this chip in 2026, Neuralink is aggressively moving out of the experimental phase and straight into a commercial production roadmap. Backed by a massive $650 million Series E funding round that valued the company at $9 billion, Neuralink is currently expanding its manufacturing facilities to build thousands of N1 implants. Their engineering roadmap for the next phase of surgeries is hyper-aggressive. They are already working through regulatory approvals for a next-generation protocol where the R1 robot will route the microscopic threads directly through the dura, the brain's tough outer membrane, without requiring the surgeon to cut it open at all. This will cut the surgical time down to under 45 minutes. At the same time, Neuralink has secured the FDA's Breakthrough Device designation for an entirely separate project called BlindSight. While the N1 chip reads signals out of the motor cortex, BlindSight aims to do the exact opposite. Feed high-resolution digital data into the visual cortex. The goal is to bypass non-functioning eyes or severed optic nerves entirely, streaming video data from an external digital camera directly into the brain's visual processing center to restore basic sight. First-in-human clinical trials for BlindSight are currently being prepared for launch. But this is where we have to stop reading the corporate press releases and look at the real risks. Let's talk about that thread retraction disaster with Noland Arbaugh. While Neuralink successfully patched the issue with software updates, investigative reports later revealed that Neuralink had actually witnessed their threads retracting and moving during animal testing phases years prior. The FDA was aware of this risk and had raised explicit safety questions during the initial reviews. Neuralink chose to push forward anyway, betting that they could manage the physical shifting on the fly. While the gamble paid off for Noland, it exposes a corporate culture that is willing to run Silicon Valley's philosophy of move fast and break things inside a living human skull. Furthermore, we must face the reality of long-term degradation. No human has lived with these microscopic polymer electrodes embedded inside their brain tissue for 5 or 10 years. The human immune system is relentless. The moment a foreign object is inserted, glial cells rush to the site, slowly wrapping the threads in microscar tissue to insulate the brain from the intruder. Over a long enough timeline, that scar tissue can completely choke out the electrical signals, rendering the chip deaf. And if the chip fails, what does the upgrade cycle look like? You can't just go to a store to swap out a broken part. Explanting a chip requires going back under the knife, having the R1 robot rip those 64 microscopic threads out of your living gray matter, potentially causing massive localized scarring, just to weave a new set in. The long-term medical fallout of hardware obsolescence inside a human head is a complete black box. Then there is the issue of data privacy. Your neural data is the most intimate data you own. It is the literal electrical output of your consciousness. In late 2025, US lawmakers introduced the Federal Mind Act, a piece of legislation directing the FTC to protect brainwave data as a uniquely sensitive category of personal information, making it illegal for companies to mine or monetize a user's cortical outputs. States like California have already updated consumer privacy laws to include neural data. Neuralink has added a local incognito mode to pause data logging, but how that protection holds up when the device scales to millions of users is a question nobody can answer yet. The individual breakthroughs for Noland, Alex, Brad, and John are life-changing and deeply real, but a technology that weaves threads through living brain tissue demands ruthless scrutiny. Responsible progress means holding both realities in your mind at once, celebrating the genuine impact on these patients' lives while remaining deeply skeptical of the corporate machine driving toward mass production. The gap between what these brain-computer interfaces look like today and where they are going tomorrow, still there, still real. But it's closing faster than almost anyone expected. Drop your pick in the comments. If you were faced with severe paralysis, would you take the ultimate gamble and let a surgical robot weave a tech company's silicon into your skull? Or does the thought of a Bluetooth chip inside your gray matter send you running? And if these stories of merging human intent with machines got your adrenaline moving, click right here. Because in Top 10 Robotics Exoskeletons That Give Humans Superpowers, we are ditching standalone AI and looking at the mind-blowing wearable gear you can strap directly onto your own body to lift hundreds of pounds, run faster, and completely bypass your physical limits. I'll see you over there.